In today's episode, we're going to talk about my 17-unit complex. What happened to it? Why did I decide to sell it? What were some of the lessons learned that you can implement so you don't make the same mistakes I did? Let's get started.
Well, Lucelia, tell me why you decided to sell your 17 properties.
Well, in part because of this. I'm kidding. Well, it has a lot to do with this.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it's because I eventually came to accept, not even the realization, to accept that if we're investing in something, the overall goal of investing is so you can improve your lifestyle. And at this point, not only my financial situation was being dragged downwards by this complex, but it was also taking away my mental peace. I wasn't able to sleep anymore, and it just wasn't adding anything. And when we find out about our pregnancy, I realized, well, do I want to keep pushing for this investment and hope to get a better outcome and not be present for our baby? And the answer was simple. And I said, I choose our family. And I pulled the trigger and I sold it. And that's why we're here to talk about that.
One of the questions that I have for you is that did you foresee any penalties, any fees that you had to pay for your properties? Because having like 17 properties is, first of all, is not cheap. And I'm sure like many unexpected, fees came up with that type of investment.
Yeah, I mean, with every real estate investment, there is always unexpected expenses. That's why banks or lenders usually require you to have reserve funds, because you never know what would happen. Even if you have insurance, sometimes there are certain things that are not covered by insurance. So in terms of penalty, I don't recall ever having to pay for a penalty. I was very organized in the sense that I always kept track of any renewal dates. I set up reminders and stuff like that. So in that sense, I didn't really have to kind of like throw money away on things like that. However, I did get a lot of unexpected expenses in all kinds of ways. So just to give everyone a bit of a background in case you are new to the channel and you have no idea what we're talking about. So a couple of years ago, I purchased a complex of 17 properties, right? So if you haven't seen that video, here it is up on the screen. You can, check it out whenever you're done with our interview. Bottom line is I bought the 17 unit complex. And at the time, it was, it's still located there, but at the time, the area was up and coming, meaning that it was just transitioning from a poor quality neighborhood on its way to becoming a good neighborhood. So when I bought that and added to my portfolio, I had a mix of tenants. Like some of them were Section 8 and then some of them were just paying on their own. I know there's a lot of mixed views or feelings regarding Section 8 tenants. They're not all bad. What I liked about Section 8 tenants was the consistency of rent that came in. Qualifying for Section 8 was a little bit tough because of how strict they are with the program. But then once you get in, it's a guaranteed paycheck. So I like that mixture of what was guaranteed. And I like the fact that the neighborhood was up and coming because it was a lower entry point for me to go in. I had a higher cash flow and I didn't have much of a budget. So like it was what my budget could afford at the time. And I figure, since we already have a good portion of the neighborhood turned into an up and coming area, all I had to do was just take care of the rest. And hopefully, the quality of the neighborhood will continue to improve over time. In terms of rental income, it was a bit of a roller coaster. Mm-hmm. There were months in where I wasn't really getting anything because, again, to qualify for Section 8, sometimes it takes a long time. So there will be months in where there was nothing coming in. And then all of a sudden, like all of the months that were lagged behind were coming in the following month. And there was a big paycheck, a big sum of cash flow coming in. But everything changed when the pandemic hit. And so the pandemic hit, and I'm sure that some of the real estate investors in this video can attest to that. The quality of the neighborhood started changing because it was transitioning. So like it wasn't as established as some other neighborhoods. So it lent itself to It's kind of like when you have a poor foundation, right? Like you shake a house to its core, and then all of a sudden everything starts falling apart. So that's exactly what started happening in the 17-unit complex. Some people were taking advantage of the situation, and they were not paying the rent. Some of them took on the task of changing professions, right? And they became delinquents, and I mean, who am I to talk, right? I don't know. Maybe they had to provide for their family and they weren't getting any assistance. They did what they had to do.
But I think just to add something on top of that you were not the only one owning that.
No, I was
right?
not.
So that means that you also had different people like owning different properties. That means that maybe they also were scared of the economy, and they were like, oh, we should need some.
Yeah, it was just like the fear was felt everywhere, not just on my end. But in terms of unexpected costs, that's where everything started coming in. Like we needed to travel to Alabama. Not that we don't like traveling down there, but I didn't envision myself traveling down there to talk with councilmen, like the head of the police department, and in order to look for ways to prevent crime to further expanding and see what all the investors could do. And to your point, I was actually the only one that cared. Like no one else cared about providing something better. So like while I was trying to preserve the quality of the properties that were within my portfolio was actually surrounded by other people's property, and they did not seem to care about doing the proper background check or doing the credit check to place good quality tenants, which for those who own real estate, you will know that the essence of rentals is getting a good quality tenant that not only will pay you on time, but that will also take care of the property. So while I was trying to do that, the people surrounding my properties were not doing that. They were just placing just about anybody. I mean, there was nothing that could be done to request them. We did reach out to them, but in the end, they didn't care. And so I had to do something about it, at least to preserve the quality of my area. And so one of the expenses, the unexpected expenses, aside from having to take the trip down there, was to, just put more public lights. We put up poles in the area, which to our surprise, we learned that there's at least for us, it was a learning, maybe for the people who were doing this for a long time, maybe not. But having lit areas is the equivalent of a lower crime. You'll be surprised what could happen in dark alleys, right? Or things that you could never anticipate or think could take place. You can prevent them from happening by just lighting up the area. So we ended up putting 2 big, massive poles in the neighborhood, just kind of like to prevent any illegal activity from happening. But it's just only a matter of time before the lights will lose its effectiveness. So like things along those lines, those are the unexpected costs that came around it. Insurance was another one, but we're going to get to that later.
I think it's very important with this type of investments to have some type of insurance because, like you said, your property is in a zone which has increased in crime. So meaning that you need to have some type of insurance because some properties of yours, I think they were burnt, right? They were on fire.
Yeah, there was vandalism, of course, happening because the decrease in the quality of the neighborhood, so to speak. So to your point regarding the insurance, it started off with one fee, right? And mind you, another lesson that I actually learned in terms of cost reduction is that if you can get your homes on multifamilies, try to get them all located in one building, because the way my portfolio is structured is that they were individual houses. Some of them were single families and some of them were duplexes. And so when that happens, everything becomes a lot more expensive, and they also become a lot more difficult to finance as well, because not a lot of lenders want to do blanket loans, meaning one blanket for you to buy a bunch of different properties. They want to finance just one structure. So in terms of insurance, it was difficult to insure in the sense that in order to get a liability coverage for all of those buildings or all of those structures, I had to pay a large premium. And to your point, because of the quality of life decreasing in that area, that insurance premium became more and more expensive over time. especially if there were some type of claims that went into it. So one year I had a fire that took place at the beginning of the year. And that property, obviously, the insurance company did some calculation of the damage. They reimbursed me. I used that money to pay for the renovations. But then the next year, the premium went up, right? And so that's another unexpected cost. And then the following year, they just didn't want to insure me. And so we had to go out and look for another insurance company, which obviously they can easily search on the records. Okay, this person is having issues. So in essence, what wound up happening is that, we had to go and look for another insurance, and then, everything is shared in their system. So they were like, okay, we see you had a couple of claims here and there. We're willing to insure you, but we're going to charge you more money. And so things just kept adding up. They were eating into the cash flow. Another tip I can share with you that also resulted in unexpected costs is flood insurance. I didn't know at the time, due to my lack of experience in investment. When I purchased the property, I didn't know they were located in a flood zone. And for those who have no idea, having your properties in a flood zone means that you will need to buy additional insurance. So there's the general liability insurance that you have, and then the dwelling, meaning the insurance that will cover the actual structure of the property. And then on top of that, you have to buy flood insurance. And same problem, because I didn't have one building. I have properties sort of like spread out in a land. The insurance had to be purchased separately per property. Why do people do that? I have a theory. Let's say, for example, if you do buy a multifamily located in one building, the expectation is that the structure will kind of look similar. So you have one apartment in a building, more or less that entire building was designed by one person or one team of people, and it will most likely look the same. So when it comes to time of like appraising it or evaluating the structure, all they need to do is just to do one evaluation of one apartment, and they multiply that by the number of apartments. So any due diligence that you do on one building tends to be cheaper than if you were doing it in properties that are spread out, because all you got to do is one review and that's applied across the board. But in my case, because I have properties spread up, there was always the possibility that one house could be different from the other, and then this one could be different from that one. So the lenders or the insurance companies, they did not want to chance that. So they had to send out an appraiser and appraise every individual unit that was out there. So you do the math, right? Let's say one appraisal costs $600 and you do it for one building, you only pay $600. But if you're doing it for 17 units, you take that 600 and then you multiply that for 17. And I should have seen that as a sign, but at the time I was just like so eager to do this investment and learn and do things out. I learned a lot. It came at a cost, but it's a cost that will help me prevent a lot of headaches in the future. And I'm glad I learned them. I mean, it looked like it was the only way.
Well, those were a lot of lessons learned. I'm really happy that you finally sold these properties. The question that I have is that now that you went through it, talk to me about the lessons learned in terms of the selling process of those properties. I know that you talked to me about the 1031 exchange, so...
Yeah, selling a multifamily, it's not as easy as selling a single family house. Like, let's just put it that way. There's obviously more demand and there's more emotions involved in the purchase of a single family home because more and more people want a family. But when it comes to a commercial investment like this one, not everyone will find my complex suitable for them. Like it requires an investor with experience, with thick skin, that knows how to handle those type of tenants that are residing there right now, and that can also have the experience to know how to transition that neighborhood and hopefully be able to turn it back to what it was before or better if that's within the plan of this new buyer, right? And so the process in itself, what's a nightmare? Like, well, why should I lie about it? It was a nightmare from the get-go. At the beginning, we attracted a lot of people who were trying to wholesale the properties, which
they were giving you some offers, and they were just like
they were very shady. And obviously, I mean, I've done the legwork as well as a wholesaler. For those who don't know what a wholesaler is, you're basically flipping a contract. Like you put a house in a contract, you don't buy it, but you sell the rights to that contract to another investor, and that investor will come in and close the deal, and the difference will be your commission. So I kind of know, I know how to identify when a wholesaler is coming into the equation versus not. So it took, I say, at least 3 months before we got a decent offer. And what's funny about it is that by the time we got the offer, then all of the other ones started floating in. So in the end, I decided to choose one. And based on the price and the time of closing, because that also plays a big factor. In my case, I ended up turning down a couple of larger offers because we had to wait a long time to close. So like for me, that wasn't ideal. So I was willing to take a cut in exchange of time.
Yep.
And so once we got the contract and a deal, of course, that's when the entire 1031 process starts, which in my opinion, and I wasn't really sure if I needed to do a 1031 exchange, but I wanted to play it safe. So for those who are new to the idea of a 1031 exchange, that's a IRS code that allows investors to sell an asset, in this case, real estate. And if you have any gains from it, you can defer the payment of taxes on the gains of that asset for the future. So let's say, for example, you bought an asset at $100 and a couple of years later, you sold it at $1,000. So there's a difference of a $900 profit, right? So that $900 profit, you have to pay taxes on it. However, the IRS will say, well, you don't have to pay taxes on it right now if you take those $900 and you invest in something of equal value or bigger. And that's what I did. So in terms of the sales price compared to the purchase price, meaning when I bought the property versus what I got out of the sale, I actually ended up with a loss, right? But because of a fire that took place earlier in the year, I ended up with a big check because the insurance deemed that fire to be a total loss. So the insurance company wound up paying me for the entire rebuild of that property. So yeah, the irony of things, right? It was a headache when I found out about it, but then I guess, it was a blessing in disguise, depending on how you want to look at it. So when you add the insurance proceed and the sales price of the 17 unit, I wind up with a profit. Totally unexpected, totally unplanned. But then I was like, now I have a bigger issue. Well, a good issue or a good problem to have is like, I need to make sure that whatever property I find has to be of a larger value, not even equal value. It has to be of a larger value to be able to offset that. Now, I haven't seen the numbers on how it's going to look in the accounting.
Yeah.
But in conversations with our accountant, I sort of added one and one together. Yes, I'm selling the property at a loss, but when you start adding the insurance, it will look like it is a gain. So I wanted to play it safe. And so I went out and I found a property, another multifamily, but this time it's all within one building. So that way I don't have to incur the same cost that I did when I first purchased a 17 unit. And the way it works with the 1031 exchange is that you cannot touch the money. So let's say, for example, I close on my 17 unit, right? So these are the three people in the equation. So I am now the new buyer. I sold it, but I now became the buyer. And you are selling me that building to me. So now you became the seller, and there's the 1031 custodian. So I close on the property, and this is the money that's coming from the sale. I cannot touch it. The moment I touch it, I have to pay taxes on it, according to the IRS. The money has to go through a third party, which is the custodian, and this custodian will hold my money until I am ready to close. So all in all, I'm not going to go into the details because it can get confusing, but with a 1031, you have a total of 6 months to close. Let's just put it that way. Like you have a certain amount of days to identify the property and then a certain amount of days to close on the property. So all in all, added together is a total of 6 months. So once I identify that property, let's say I identify that property that you have and I want to buy it from you, I have to put a deposit, right? So I won't pay you the deposit. The deposit will come from the custodian. The custodian will send you the money, And then we're going to go into all that paperwork that the banks require, qualifying me for a loan and stuff like that. And then at the time of closing, this custodian is going to send you the remaining funds to you. And then the rest of the money will come from the bank, and that's how you close it. So in essence, I should not touch the money at all. And if you're doing a 1031 exchange, you should not touch that money at all. And if you touch it, it's too late. You cannot go back and change it.
And the question that I have is, that custodian, is that free? Is that like a service that, I don't know, like the buyer is offering you for you?
My custodian is great, but no one will do business with you for free. I mean, let's face it. Everybody has, rent and staff to pay, and it is their time. So in terms of the fee, I'm not going to disclose how much I pay because every custodian rate is different, and it also varies depending on the type of transaction that you do. So it wouldn't be fair to my custodian to say, oh, this is how much I pay. But you do have to pay a fee. Depending on how you look at it, it might seem expensive. Some people might find it cheap. I found it to be just right because of the size of the transaction that I was doing. And that's how things work with a 1031 exchange. Before you do a 1031 exchange, you have to disclose it in the sale because they need to include that in the contract. There's additional paperwork that they need to fill out. If you forgot to do that, it's not the end of the world. That's what happened with me. I forgot to do it. And then in the end, we were able to put it in, and everything was fine.
Now that you went through the entire process of selling the property, do you have any additional lessons that you want to share with our audience?
I do have a lesson.
The most important one, perhaps?
I will say it is for me. Maybe for the audience, it might be a little off topic because this is an investment channel, but you and I have grown a lot over the years. It started off from wanting to make our basic needs and finding financial stability, but now we're at the stage where we seek more spiritual growth and understanding, the meaning of life. And so I remember that when I first set eyes on the 17-unit complex, I share the details with another real estate investor who's much older than we are and has been doing this for a long time. And I told him everything that I'm sharing here today about, the 17 unit and the fact that it's in an up-and-coming neighborhood and stuff like that. And the first thing he said to me was, I don't like those type of investments. And then so when I asked him why, he was like, well, there's a certain energy associated to those type of investments. It's an up-and-coming neighborhood, which means that danger can be in the vicinity. There could be murders, there could be vandalism. And that's a heavy energy that I don't want to get involved. And at the time, I wasn't much of a spiritual person, or at least I thought, right? And then I thought, well, a murder can happen anywhere. It's not just in a bad neighborhood. How many times have you heard about people getting too drunk at a party and then they just fell off the balcony and things like that? So I was just well, that's a little too extreme. But thanks for the advice, but I always kept it within me. And now in retrospect, many years later, I'm looking back and I realize, she was right in every bit of the way. The amount of heavy energy that was associated with the type of neighborhood, the type of tenants that were living in the area. These are tenants that they come with a package. And because I invested in the area, part of that package also transitions on that money onto me. And I even remember saying to you that even in the closing, it was like a living hell. It's like me trying to get out of a haunted house. And then the spirits were holding on to my feet. They were not letting me go. Even though I tried as hard as I could, everything associated with the sale and the closing was a nightmare. Everything was a mess. The team that was involved in it, not that I hire them. And in Alabama, the buyer has the right to choose who they want as their closing agent. And even that was a complete nightmare. It took weeks before I got paid, even after all the documents were paid. And it even got to the point where I thought I just handed over the properties for free and I was stuck with a mortgage. But at the end of the day, that was the biggest lesson. Some people carry a certain baggage. You can try your very best to help them because I did try to transition that neighborhood and continue to bring it up. But sometimes you just can't. And you're going to have to choose because you realize that you don't have unlimited energy to keep fighting. And choosing to step away and delegating that portfolio, in my case, to someone else with more experience or with a thicker skin than I do, doesn't make me a loser or doesn't make me someone who failed. I did not fail. I learned, I did the best I could. And now there are more important things in life that require my attention.
Yep.
And I choose this. I choose us. And I really hope that whoever the new owner is can do their very best, and that all of their plans get fulfilled and they become true with the neighborhood.
Thank you, Lucelia, for this awesome interview. I hope you learned a lot in this episode. Do you have anything else that you want to add?
No, just let us know what you think about this new format, and we'll be seeing you in the next video. Take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Bye.